Hello, everyone. I am Tawana TJ Everhart. Most people call me TJ because normally when they see the name Tawana as it's spelled, they don't say it right. So I'm TJ Everhart. I am the CEO of TJ Everhart Consulting. I'm also the co-owner of Capture It Training Solutions. We're workplace training solutions company. So what I do for TJ Everhart, I go in and help organizations identify the human gaps that they have that's preventing them from being sustainable and profitable, because being into business is all about making money. So prior to starting my own business, I had about 20 plus years as an operations manager in several Fortune 500 companies, one being Wells Fargo, one being T-Mobile. And my role in those organizations was to ensure that my teams and my department met their operational goals. And that came with a lot of having to develop myself, develop other leaders. I'm looking at processes and procedures. So, what I do now is I go into small businesses because a lot of times small business owners, they're really, really great at what they do. They're really, really great at the craft of their service and what they're offering, but they may not be that good in having processes and procedures, developing people. They may have problems in their leadership and they may have cultural issues. So that is what I do. I also am a podcaster. I have a podcast called Life Ain't Fair, Redesign It. And I'm going to kind of talk about that later on today. And then I'm the co-host of another podcast called The Ops Manager and the Lawyer. And it's with me and my partner with Capture It Training Solutions. And we kind of go in and talk about cases and lawsuits and issues that we've seen and heard about on the news, and how those things could have been resolved had the workplace been better trained. So we want to be your proactive resource, right? Helping you to learn the laws at work so you won't make the mistakes at work, because mistakes cost too much money and we can't afford to do that. So that's me, Tawana TJ Everhart of TJ Everhart Consulting Inc. Podcaster, author, coach, transformational speaker, all of that. You can find me. And I'll give you that information later too. The struggle for me. So a lot of times when people think about domestic violence, they typically only tend to think about the person who is being violated, the victim of domestic violence. Very rarely do they ever think about the children in the home. And I was a child that grew up in a home of domestic violence. I can remember it was so bad. I remember my dad, one time he actually shot my mom while my sister and I were in the house. And he would not allow us to call the police or the ambulance to help her. Now, he shot her in her hand, but she was sitting there bleeding, and my sister and I could not call the police. We couldn't do anything. So just imagine you're sitting there watching your mom bleeding. It was so bad that my dad, he didn't care if my friends were at the house. He didn't care if we were out in public. He did not care. And so I remember one time my mom used to always leave. She would leave my dad. And if you know anything about domestic violence, they go into that cycle of staying, leaving, staying, leaving. So it was common for us to, my mom would pack up things and leave. But believe it or not, I was really, really a daddy's girl. And my dad wasn't violent towards my sister and I. He was violent towards my mom, but I really was a daddy's girl. Like wherever my daddy went, I wanted to go. And so I remember I was around 12 years old, and my mother was leaving my dad. And this particular time, I did not want to go with my mom. I wanted to stay with my dad. So my mom took my sister and she left, and I stayed with my dad. Well, in my dad's anger towards my mom, he turns around to me. He says to me, "You know I'm not your daddy, don't you? Your mama went out while I was in the army, in the war, slept with some dude, and had you. So what? What is that to tell a child? But what? So it was at that age that I found out that my dad is not my biological father. And it was at that age where I started realizing that the reason why my mother was being beat on a regular basis was because she decided to keep me. She decided to have me. And he has to look at me as a constant reminder of what she did. And so now I carry that as a child. I carry that why didn't she just give me away? Why wasn't I not aborted? If anybody should have been aborted, and trust me, I am very pro-life. But I'm saying, if anybody should have thought about it, I can only imagine that my mother would have. So my mom was 17 when she got married. My dad was 19. My dad got sent off to Vietnam. My mother got pregnant at 18. So we're talking about teenagers because she had me at 19. So I can only think about all the mistakes my mom made. But now I have to carry this as a child. So for the longest, I carried the fact that if I was not here, my mother would not be going through what I went through, what she was going through. So fast forward, it was bad. Like, again, my dad, I've come to realize in my older age that my dad needed medical care and mental counseling and therapy, but he didn't get it. So I went through those years, my teenage years, my high school years of living in a house with someone who was just always angry. So I went off to college. I could not wait to go to college because going to college was me getting out of the house. So I go to college. My dad pays for my tuition my first year of college. The second year of college, he decides that he's not going to pay it anymore. I don't know why. He just decided not to. So now I have to come home and go to school full time and find a job full time. So I was about 18 years old at the time because I went to school at 16. I had just turned 17 when I went to college. So I'm a year ahead of everyone else that in my age range. So I had to get a full-time job. I had to go to school full-time. I was at work one day and I got a call that I needed to come to the hospital and that my mom had been rushed to the hospital. I was 19. This was August. I had turned 19 in March. This was in August. I get a call that I need to come to the hospital because my mother had been rushed to the hospital. I remember when I left to go to work that day, that my dad would not let my mom go to work. So when they told me that I had to get to the hospital, I knew it was something my dad had done to my mother because he would have those days where he would not let her go to work. So when they said get to the hospital, I go to the hospital. When I arrive at the hospital, they tell me your mom has a 3% chance of living and that she had been burned. So it's like, okay, okay. Then, as I'm standing there talking to my mother's mother, so my grandmother, my aunts, they roll a body in front of me on a gurney. This body had no hair, no skin, nothing. And they told me that was my mother, that she had been burned, 3rd-degree burns from her waist up. My mom was no longer the person that I knew that I left at the house, but my mom had been burned. So what do I do now? I still got to go to school. I still have to work. And now I have a mother that's in the hospital and a sister and a father who's having a mental breakdown because he has been involved in my mother being burned. So, okay. August, my mother goes in the hospital. April 9th, I turned 20 years old, March 10th. April 9th, my mother passes away in the hospital. She had been in the hospital from August to April. I turned 20. 20 years old, no mother. What am I supposed to do? When you think back on when you were 20, when I think back on it now that I have a 25 and 21, I have a 20-year-old who swears she knows everything, but we all know she doesn't, because I didn't know either. I just knew I'm 20 years old, have a 17-year-old sister that I now need to be responsible for. And what do I do? It was in the struggle, though, that I realized some things. But I'll tell you this, that was the hardest thing I ever had to deal with, burying my mother and picking up my life and become a full-grown adult at the age of 20. That was a struggle for me. The gift in the struggle. So there have been a lot of gifts that came out of that struggle. And sometimes I wonder how I made it. So I recognized that in life, and this is for everybody, life ain't fair. Redesign it. No, it wasn't fair. I sit back and I'm like, my mom missed graduation from college, my marriage, my husband, my children, my grandchild. My mother missed every single powerful, important milestone in my life. So the gift in the struggle, though, was that something inside of me said that I still had greatness inside of me, no matter what the situation was. So, okay, I had to own it, right? I've learned out of this that own the situation, own, what happened. All right, I own it. My mom passed away. Now what? So you have a choice in life. You can either sink or swim. And I don't sink. And I realized that in this girl is unstoppable. Was it easy? Heck no. Did I have to cry a lot? Yes. I learned so much through this, though. I learned that I am resilient and that I can do anything I put my mind to. I learned that things don't stop me. When I sit back and think about, I graduated college, undergrad. I graduated with my master's degree. I have managed people up to 250 plus people under me. I have worked in Fortune 500 companies. I speak all over the place. And what I found was that the only reason I can do that is because I decided to be unstoppable. That a challenge in life is not going to be my end. Like something inside of me when I was 20 years old, and I would be in that apartment by myself. And I didn't have any family members who were calling to see if I had lights, if I had water. But what I realized is, girlfriend, you're going to have to go and get it. So I could sit there all day and I could ponder on what I don't have. Or I focused on what I do have. And that's exactly what I did. Instead of spending all of my days focusing on the fact that my mother wasn't there, I was thankful for the friends and the people that God placed around me that took that place for her. I didn't focus on what I could not do. I focused on what I could do. So the gift of the struggle is this girl is unstoppable. And I would have never known that had I not been plunged into life at the age of 20 years old. I remember having to take my sister. I had to stand up for my sister her senior year when they say, Who's the parents? She had all these awards and stuff, awards day, and you have to stand up, your parents stand up for the person that's getting an award. I had to stand up for my 17-year-old sister. I was just 20 myself. Stand up for her and represent my family, for my sister. I had to go on college tours to show and help my sister figure out which college to go to. And my sister graduated with honors. She had a full ride. She ended up going to the University of Alabama on a free ride. She made it. The struggle taught us that we are freaking unstoppable, and that when a challenge comes, you don't let the challenge deter you. You cry. I cried a lot of times. I cried. I felt bad for a few minutes. You want to have your little pity party. Woe is me. But I did not stay there. And I will never stay there. And there's absolutely nothing that I cannot do. Because again, this girl is unstoppable.